The ecosystem meeting was just wrapping up, so people will start appearing shortly, I'm sure.
All right. Hey, Neil.
Sure. Great presentation. SSI meets telecom, finally.
Finally.
The only question is, it's going to cost various players some money.
Yeah. They're also quite conservative bunch, so um it seems pretty hard to see most cases where they would lead.
Well, there's a full-blown trial happening apparently in the next week or so in Great Britain across multiple telecom providers.
Ah,
I would agree. Generally speaking, they tend to be resistant, but in this case, it may be those who play will be used by both businesses and their, shall we say, audience and customers, and those who don't play well, you're going to lose them. So, be interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating what they're doing. I how challenging it's going to be to get it broadly adopted. Um, it's a big lift. If GSMA is pushing it, that obviously can help, but it's still a big lift. It's fun to see they're making progress. By the way, I have to multitask today and be in another meeting, so I will be off camera for most of this one. Um, but I'll be trying to listen in.
All right. Thanks, Drummond. Thanks for joining. Okay. Let me put
And I'm
our
like
page on.
watching another meeting, so if I space out, that's why.
All right.
Yeah, this is the Gleanet Alliance meeting talking about building fiduciary agents. So
Very nice.
it's a very necessary part of distributed alignment, AI alignment. So
Yeah, I like that word actually. It's really like a lot of the um, legal theories and the reasons they certain things are done, and it really clarify a lot of problems.
well, I think if we have agents that have fiduciary relationships with each other over contractual relationships, in other words, you have essentially the obligation to comply with the spirit of contracts rather than the letter of contracts. And I think if
Yes.
we can get that to be the case, then we're going to have a much better agential economy in society.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because the letter we know it's always limiting.
Right, exactly. It's the genie, but
Yeah, yeah.
you ask the wish the wrong way and you're in trouble, or the devil. Same thing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm just trying to keep attendance um recorded. Oh, hi Eric. Good to see you.
Good to be back.
Yeah. Thanks. I understand there's a very good meeting on the other call.
Yeah, good stuff happening. Really good stuff.
Yeah.
Implementation of trust over IP technologies and tools, and it's really good to see.
And the
Very
time
nice. Very
is
nice.
amazing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, so let's kick start. So for today agenda, I basically put it down similar to what we had last week. We saw quite a bit of a discussions. I think it's a natural follow-up from last week. So rather than, brand big new topics, I thought it would be good to consolidate and spend another call on making sure that the proposed diagram would serve the purpose for this particular specification. It may not be perfect to try to answer all questions, but at least we want to be certain that it's going to be really good anchor for this particular specification, right? So that's the goal. And I think I put down two topics we can get to. So the first one is simply going through some of the new discussions and what problems or what new perspective have been popping up and see how we can handle it. The second topic, if we could get to, is actually getting to beyond sort of authorization type of topic, but also into data handling or disclosure retention, personal data. So more of like privacy and obligations. Um, and if we get to that, there are, there are different differences in that. So I think that would be also be useful. So those are the two topics I put on for the main agenda. And then there are a lot of new work going on on the news sides. I just, sort of highlighted a few here. The choice of IP had a 123 carry related specs done formally. So those are the top three links. And we were also working on a UIN identifier. So this is a SET means self
Addressing.
addressing identifier. Okay, self-addressing identifier. Um, it's really a identifier that I think the carry spec talks about, and we are simply putting that as a UIN format. So you now have a way to identify a piece of data, let's say, and you could insert a ID into it and using the UIN set form methods. And this will be a standardized UIN identifier. So guys, people, you understand the TSP spec. In the TSP spec, we actually specifically talk about UIN identifier as a one option of the the verifiable IDs. So VIDs in the TSP message format, the sender and receiver could be UIN identifiers. Excuse me. Thanks for the forwarding of the travel profile. It's a Hat Pro is a travel profile, right? And also there are several IETF, IFI, informational IFIs talking about similar things, authentication, authorization, and I forgot what this one is about. But all of those are very good. Just point here, we should at least take a look, see what kind of approach other people are taking. I saw Eric and then Neil. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you. Not to go to deep discussion, but just a general sense. Do do we think the with AI agents and the proliferation, and there's going to be so many, do we think that the standard way of identifying and then of authenticating and then authorization will change? I'm just thinking we in the normal flow we ask someone to identify themselves, and then based on that identification we give them, we figure out what their permissions.
Right.
But
Right.
is it at all possible to think the other way around and say, listen, I don't care who you are, first show me that you have permission to even get this far, and then and then after that we'll try to figure out where you should go. But it seems like there could be a lot of time and effort wasted on figuring out who agents are, and then
Yeah.
saying, oh, now we know who you are, but you don't have permission. Why did I waste my time on going through that process?
Yeah. So we definitely are. If you look at the introduction, we are saying we can go beyond the existing framework, right? So existing framework I just use the general term of the web stack because it is invented mostly for web services.
Yeah.
And so in that paradigm, you are talking about a client to access a service.
Yeah.
And it is a service that's deciding what rule it's going to enforce. And most of the interactions are designed to allow permissions. So this is to say, do you have access to this or not?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
It's a permission kind of a. So the analogy would be like you are going to different rooms and there's a guard, which
Right.
each one have different conditions to check. And once
Right.
you pass that guard, you are then free to do a lot of
Right.
things.
All right. And
And that
in that permission, you're just proving that you have permission,
right.
but not necessarily who you are.
The two are often tied because of the way we know that like for example OIDC type of it's actually based on a authorization scheme to implement authentication.
Okay.
Right. So one of the way they do it would be because you need a lot of guards and the guards are very hard to implement, right?
Hmm.
The guards need to be trusted and perfect, etc. So one way to do it is that they will say you go to a guard and the guard say, well, you should go to that particular office to get a permit first, to get a token.
Yeah.
So you go to a specialized office, which probably are more trained to do this, and they will give you a piece of paper with a stamp and say, "Here you go." And you use
Hmm.
that stamp, come back to the room, and just show the stamp to the guard, and you walk in.
Hmm.
So that's
Okay.
that's kind of federation. This is how I think about it, intuitively, right?
So you prove
And
your identity to somebody else, and then
And
you go.
exactly, and then there's a lot of loophole there. You can
Yeah.
give this thing the ticket to somebody else, and
Right. Right. Right.
somebody
Right.
else working.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah. So it's a so baseline to answer your question is yes, we find that all that the framework is very limiting. And
Yeah.
also, we thought we need to break that ground, break that boundary and go beyond that at least. And that's clearly said about in the introduction section. And um, how far we go is a lot is really related to, I think we all come down to maybe using different terminology to the same thing, is that the workflow or the framework of thinking about these questions are going to be very different. And we may still use the same terminology, but unfortunately we mean different things. Because this, authorization, like there's always a problem of like in your example, questioning whether somebody have a right even to be here, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
It's a difficult one. And so the
Hmm.
term, I think, in the introduction I put down there is dynamic, meaning that it's not one shot thing. You will be constantly going through this. So
Yeah.
dynamic just means, every time you go to something else, you will need some other similar, maybe smaller or more fluid kind of authorization.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it becomes a lot more, the whole overall picture becomes more, I guess, I don't know what's the good adjective to use, by dynamic or fluid
Yeah.
or, yeah,
Yeah. They're talking about continuous authentication.
continuous, right?
And
Yeah. And you can think of it many different ways, but basically the overall paradigm then dramatically changed.
yeah. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Just
Okay, so
very, very
that's the
good point.
framing of it. Yeah. Neil.
Yeah, a couple of points. One is on OpenID Connect. So my history into SSI came through OpenID Connect. And if you look at the EU wallets, the first versions are all OpenID Connect for VC based.
Yeah.
My observation in terms of what they're doing under the hood and conversations with some of the OIDC board members who I work, ran into at IIW a number of years ago, is right now they're predominantly using the initial sign-in to get you authenticated using existing third party. So you're using a bank vetted, user ID password as a gateway into it. But under the hood, they're increasingly using straight, DIDCOM and whatever else, and using SSI, DIDs, et cetera, et cetera. So they're in terms of the plumbing, it's moving on from using that user ID and password to start. So I think what they're doing is saying, okay, at some point, that's the established infrastructure, particularly in the Europe. OpenID Connect has a huge base, so trying to, keep pushing a pure OpenID Connect model is could go well, but they see what's coming. So I think that's gradually. So I could certainly see them using TSP for all the internal operations about getting because they know that the token mechanism for authorization tokens is very weak. So they're quietly changing a lot under the hood. So
Yes.
So I think there's some.
Yeah. So 2 points, right? In the introduction, we did say we want to go beyond current framework. At the same time, we say that's not mean to replace them. So it's definitely you can conceive many different ways. Both will exist. You could do maybe keep a current scheme and only in some more dynamic or more I don't know, new situations use something like TSP or integrate the two together. All those are very likely to happen. In addition to that, there is also a mention of the so-called evolutionary path. So there are a lot of very well organized efforts going on right now to extend ORs and presumably, as you mentioned, OIDC as well, so that they can overcome some of the ways it was used before and introduce new workflows within that framework. So all those are, I think, all very valid, and we don't mean to say that all that will go away.
Yep. The other one on Hat Pro starts is I'm a co-chair on that over on Diff. We'll have a spec out. A first initial GitHub repo release is going to be April 2nd for, I won't tell you
very
why
nice.
I'm pointing the first. But so it stands for Hospitality and Travel Profile. So it is a extremely in-depth personal profile. At this point, we're looking at, a fully fleshed out travel profile could have as many as 10,000 different data points.
Okay, so that would be a new version, right?
Yeah.
So new
So
version.
it's really, so it's really a first sort of public release of the actual source code and all the bits and pieces. So it's a JSON schema, but it's got validation and verification mechanisms built into it.
Beautiful.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand the use case for it, Neil.
Sorry?
What's the use case? So how do you see this protocol being used?
The use case is what I've got to provide very personal information to get personalized services. So I've got, extreme hospitality requirements, my travel, my favorite, my seating preferences, whatever else. It's also got information on, medical or health conditions that you have needs. Like we're not going to be putting medical information in. We're going to put what are your needs? What are the things you need? I need a wheelchair. I must have access to power on an aircraft because I have an oxygen concentrator. I have concerns. I'm very nervous with heights. I can't walk stairs. I need a washroom break every 30 minutes. So in other words, to tailor it, I think one of the key here, the key to the hospitality and travel industry is personalization. 60+ % of people said, if you could really personalize my trips for me, I would be willing to spend more money. So that's what's driving.
Yeah.
It's how they differentiate.
It
So
sounds very
that
Doc
really
Stoll's intent cast to ask. Yeah, if you know Doc. Anyway, yeah. Okay, great.
So the challenge here is, so many of the use cases that SSI does, selective disclosure, or uses some form of, verifiable, transparently verifiable information that's, hidden cryptographically, but that doesn't work for personal services. So the simple answer there is you're handing that information out with an extreme time limitation. It's not in the interest of the receiver to store that information because it makes them liable, and the insurance industries are increasingly stomping on people who hang on to very personal information. But there's a simple answer if you've got a wallet. It's you say, okay, here's a token, secured token, and you can come back and ask me for that every time you need it over, say, a period of 2 weeks. So it's really sandboxing the information that the wallet is becoming the gateway as to when the information is, because not sharing the personal information doesn't work if you want personal service. So
Neil, this sounds really cool and important, but it seems a little bit different than authentication and authorization. Can you describe how it fits that part?
it's strictly looking at the schema of the information and a approach to how the data would be shared. So, for a given particular ask, the travel industry has already shown internally that there's like 6 stages of travel, from exploratory to shopping to purchasing to in travel to post travel. And the industry is already leaning towards here are the questions it's reasonable to ask. So if somebody's saying, I just need a quote for travel, then you don't need their passport. So they're already self-limiting themselves based on hanging on information that makes them liable. The other big issue for service providers is, if they've been hanging on to your personal information, it's probably stale. Human beings are not going to go and update every service provider with all their personal information each time. So that being sitting on their wallet, there's a huge incentive for the service providers to come and ask you directly instead of storing it, because they need your up-to-date information. So the model tends to shift there. Did I answer your question?
You answered part of it. Um, this won't be like an agent
No,
did
it's strictly
authorization, authentication.
it's really it's a pure schema. It's a pure,
Yeah.
intended to be a JSON schema. It's a record set, and it probably has an administrative agent sitting in front of it that actually does the selective disclosure, and that's needs a protocol, and that's currently not an item as a project. So it is not playing any, it does not have any identification aspects to it in terms of a certificate or whatever else. It will be a self-signed certificate and self-signed information that gets passed back in terms of a question saying, what are your seating preferences for an airplane? So it is the content, not the identification. It is the content that's being exchanged. So it has an opinion on how that information should be exchanged from a privacy perspective, but it's agnostic to the identity.
Yeah, when we first started, we
Right.
were trying to work on a deep dive on use cases, and I think this would be a great use case. And so if we could maybe later on sometime pick the this spec and see how in our TEA framework we would be able to implement it, that would be a great use of it, right? Yeah, good,
Yeah,
good. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Perfect. Okay, so maybe we should dive into our first topic. And again, so I will show the diagram again, and the question, there's quite a few questions come up, but the main one I remember, I want to make sure we have time to discuss it, is that it's about continual learning models. So let's say in a very classic or simple diagram here, we have so this main box, I'm thinking about calling it controller. There's people call different names, but this is the one that is actually doing the loop and workflow and all the scaffolding. This is classic software typically, but the overall structure of the agent. And then it deals with one or more of the models. But what happens if the model is continuously learning? Meaning that this model, instead of a static file that's being loaded to a execution engine, right? So simply a forward pass going through the model with context and something come out of it. Other than just that, the model would actually be taking the input along the way and then modify its own, at least its own parameters in some way. So that would be a model of a continual learning. And in addition, of course, if we, so that would be scenario one. The second, that is a not a very commercially widely used yet, so it's still a research topic. But on the second mode, is that the model or the model we are accessing it through a API already. And of course, behind the API, the model is not a quote unquote simple model, right? And so the actual behind the scenes, it's doing a lot. It's doing, probably the entire picture we are seeing here. It has memories, it remember a lot of things. It has, maybe not a one model, but a whole set of them. And they are doing all kind of a mixing, matching, and all of that already. So it's much more complicated than a very simplistic viewpoint. And so how do we deal with that? So those are the questions I have, and the reason I thought this picture would still be okay is because we start with something we know, we can clearly say that's a simple classic model over here. But if the model becomes more and more complicated, then in a way it is basically an agent. So we're not really dealing with, when we go to the API, we're not really calling a particular known model anymore. Rather, we are calling a type of service. The service itself actually fitting the definition of this agent very well. So we will be talking about in this link instead. So that's how we think about this, and you can see this picture can be like recursively used. So, for instance, a particular agent could be has components itself as agents too, and that would go down forever. And so this particular line is really the when we are looking at this particular instance about again authority and accountability type of a question, we identify this particular instance, and it could within itself contain subcomponents which are also agents. Anyway, so that's the current thinking. We'll see, open up for discussion, see if that would meet our need anyway.
Well, I put my comments in the chat there. I mean, I agree with you. I wouldn't call that a model. I would call that an agent or sub-agent, if you want to put it that way, or a generative agent. But I don't like using the word model except for something which is stateless, which only has the weights. So that's my opinion on the subject.
Yeah. So if you think of this as like a recursive definition, the very bottom is a model, maybe, but on the
Right.
or the middle,
Any state in it becomes an agent.
yeah,
Second, it has any context, it's an agent. It's not a
correct.
model. It's a model. It's an agent running in a model, is what it is. It goes from being a model to an agent running in a model.
I think the dotted lines are surrounding the agent. So the model and the context is inside the agent. That whole bubble's the agent.
Well,
Yeah.
It has a model
yeah, we're all
and
agreeing
has
on that. Saying
context.
that the model itself should also be labeled a sub-agent rather than
So for instance, because we do have, remember there's a box here. I don't know, it won't be able to be perfect, but you could include this and say that will be the composite um, agent that has more than just a basic model in it, right? So again, if you, I don't know how to graphically depict this better, but if you apply this recursively, then you would be able to see more and more complex agents that way. So in a way, this picture shows the very bottom. If you allow recursion, then the very bottom is this picture.
But yet, even at the bottom layer, once again, as soon as there's any context in there, it becomes an agent. So, I would almost prefer, once again, the term atomic agent here rather than model because I think agent implies state and model doesn't imply state. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. This does not imply it has a state. That's why we put a separate box to represent the state.
Okay, but I mean, when it's executing, it does have state. I mean, it's so if you want to say this is the architecture pre-execution, then this is correct. During execution, it does have state and then is the agent. So it's a matter
Well,
of different
I can
time.
definitely construct a agent that the model has absolutely no state at all.
Can I jump in for a second? Just make a
Yes.
comment.
Mhm.
Yeah, like what I've seen with OpenClaw, like that dotted box is like basically called a session, and you can actually manage multiple sessions and blow them away and recreate them. So a session is usually wired to a model and like as you said, context and memories. I would say also directives as well, skills or whatever.
Yes.
And then you can switch to a different session, and then carry it on and then switch back to another session.
Yeah.
So I think the useful construct here is that there is state. I totally agree. And that state is basically it can be forever or it can be ephemeral or whatnot. So I think and the other interesting thing is that um, a higher order agent can actually be managing those sessions as well. So maybe you need to introduce a notion of a session, and that's kind of like your recursive thingy.
Yeah. So session, we discussed last week as well on session, and it's basically live or when it's active, right? So for instance, that if we allow this particular session and there's a memory and we save the memory and sometime later we restart a session, we want to say that's the same agent talking because the memory and the states are preserved and you revive it later. That will be
Yeah, that's exactly it.
yeah. So that instance, you're absolutely right. That's what we meant by the agent, and we basically say that's the agent's life, right? You have a time duration until one day you say I'm going to remove all this, all the memory is gone, and it's the end of it.
Well, the only problem with that is that agents then by default are immortal because as soon as if they get stored and they're still considered live, in other words, if you archive them just to possibly preserve their execution at some point in the future, now you have, an infinite scope, which I think then needs to be,
Well,
reduced by permissions or whatever else.
well, that's exactly how things are playing out. Like this notion of an agent is less concrete than what people think it is, and it can exist multiple sessions. It could actually probably exist across multiple machines. So, you know, the the thing that I'm starting to identify is that there is some sort of controller behind the scenes that has motivations, and kind of how I've generalized. Well, you've got the dotted boxes there, human users or other agents. I've collapsed that in my mind to the concept of what I call a beneficial controller. Someone's like orchestrating all this stuff to some end,
Yeah.
which you might not know. And those agents may just be like loyal hands and feet of a greater grand strategy that you might not know. And those sub agents or whatever maybe special, maybe using specialized models to avail themselves to a particular task or whatever. and they may be working in concert. Like that's kind of so. Like as I said, there is some sort of beneficial controller that has some sort of super session that's going on, and that it has subsessions, and in those sessions, there's some sort of process that's using a model to execute actions, and that's kind of how I've distilled it in my mind, whether that's useful or not.
Yeah, so the again, all that orchestration or controlling is represented in this box. And so we basically say we separate three things there so we can talk about them in some way. And then the you know so the interesting I think part is that yes, how you actually execute this, there's numerous variability, right? You could have multiple computers, parallelize them, and as long as you reasonably do well on syncing the memories, and they will behave as if it's the same. So all those are, this model doesn't forbid, you're okay to do any of those. Neil, and then Eric.
Yeah, so to put this in travel terms, the context there's basically there's two contexts for any travel, right? So there's
Yeah.
this specific trip that's been context, and the profile backs up saying, if it's this kind of trip, here's my preferences for it, but it may also have a lot of general things that apply across them. So and so you've really got two contexts. You've got the long-term preference and needs context. You've got the trip specific, and memories is going to include what we all do when we're dealing with AI. I don't want all the stuff and all the trips I've taken and all the changes I've had to make and all whatever that history, my travel history is important in providing missing hints that may not be in my formal profile.
Right.
So yeah, all those things are absolutely critical.
Eric? You are muted, Eric.
Yes, the question is, if you change in the centerpiece, the whole question we have about when does the agent change, when is it the same agent, etc. Because here it's got a vid,
Yes.
and we keep going back to that. We point to that vid via as a TSP endpoint. But if we change the context, change the memories, or change the models, is there a way to recognize that? Going back to the question of when is it the same, if you change all the components, is it still the same agent?
Right. I think this has come to the like what I keep saying, that we don't need this diagram to be perfect. We just need to be good enough so that it can express the way we implement or the architecture, right? So here we're basically saying, at the end of the day, what is an agent? The agent is the entity that has that vid.
Yeah.
Okay, controls that, and because we do authorization based on that, we do accountability based on that, and whatever that thing, we say, well, I'm going to make you accountable, and that
Mhm.
you
Right.
is the agent, right? So yes, we can have these very atomic, simple ones. We can also have a composite with lots of things in it, as long as one of them can represent the whole for accountability and authority, then
Yeah.
that is the agent. And
Right.
yes, you can change model along the way. And
Okay,
it's
but
still
is there
same.
any, yeah, of course. Is there any benefit in sort of tying it all together as a sort of a vid that includes the hash of it's using this model and it's using this context? And if anything changes, then that vid updates or it breaks because it actually isn't the same vid that you thought. And I know that the accountability is
Right.
um
Yeah.
we can
It,
follow
When you
the
get into
line, but
reputation, right?
yeah.
Exactly. So the
Yeah.
ID, I mean, it's the operator, whoever deployed this could
Mm.
decide, saying, I want this new model so different from the previous one. I decide that we should have a new identity. That's fine. But we basically say that's how. If you want to do that, then you should use a new vid
Yeah.
because everything else is tied to policies. Everything is tied to the vid, right?
Yeah. Just trying to figure out if
Or
there's
we want to another way. We will otherwise we will need another way of identification that is can. So it comes
If
down to like when we
if I give
describe a policy, what is referring to,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Haley, you want to?
Yeah.
if I give an agent access, sorry, if I give an agent access to something, I give your agent Wenjing access to my emails so that you can sort them or find meetings or something, right? And
Mhm.
then you go in and you change the model, you change the context and memories, but you give it the same vid, right? There can be an issue there where I've given access to one thing I thought it was, and now it's changed.
Right. And that's
So
that's always going to happen. It's just in difference in degree because
yeah.
it always happens. That's what I'm saying is who gonna, I think we can make a decision for others because that's whoever deploy that service or offer you the service, right? Even we say GPT, I don't know what's the version nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, well, I'm sure every day they're changing it. It's just that they decide when to rename it or
Right.
upgrade the model number. And I guess at the end of the day, that will show up as a accountability or reputation of something
Yeah.
if you make big changes without without actually saying it, right?
Yeah. I guess the question then is there a vid for the middle dotted line box, which contains a vid of the agent, or is that, can I give an identifier to that combination? Is that helpful?
Um,
Rather than saying, we're just going to give the vid, the identifier to this piece, the other pieces, we don't care about. Well, in fact, we do. Can't we give that ensemble a an identifier?
yeah, so maybe imagine like I didn't do it, but imagine this is one diagram.
Yeah,
And then I will have another diagram which does compositions.
yeah,
Okay, so one example would be a main agent with three specialized agents, let's say. Okay,
yeah.
and each one has its own vid. Now, maybe the whole combination, we
Has a
can give
vid.
it another vid. And
Yeah,
again, which one is actually critical for policy purposes is depending on which layer you're looking at it.
right. Yeah,
To
I
a
mean,
customer, maybe the overall of it is what they care about, but to the engineer, you want to know which is which, right?
right. But at some point we want to get atomic, and what happens, what's, the protons, the neutron, the whatever. How far down do we want to go to say, well, this is good for
Yeah,
now. We can
exactly.
say,
You could have an instantiation have its
Mhm.
own identification and have certification for that instantiation. So you actually have a very constrained context. You actually have the query, the prompt, and everything else, the whole execution of the agent, except for its generative element, pre-programmed as a start point, and then you could give that a vid. That would be like the most deeply embedded, as I call it, level of an agent.
Mhm.
What um, I think we can dive a little deeper. So what doesn't change is that during the session, or even like including the revive of the session, etc., right? Normally the weight doesn't change. So accumulation of memory doesn't change the weight, but the weight is a execution. It's still a session. It's just that the session can be quite long. Exactly same model, same code, but you start with empty memory. You start another instance that has its own weight.
Mhm.
So we're not identifying like the static code. We identify the running of it.
Mhm.
And the purpose of this, of course, is that because we need to write some policy rules, and rule need to say, this agent, like, what does that mean, this agent, right? You need a name for it in order to enforce it.
Mhm. So what do
Um,
you say? We're not naming static code. We're naming what?
we're naming these, I guess, using a
Running.
Tim's word would be the session. Any running instance is so like ChatGPT, if it has 1 million users, that's 1 million sessions already there. Each
Mhm.
one's different, right? Each user
Mhm.
may potentially have multiple sessions too.
And like I said, I like a nested human readable naming convention where you can put as much detail into that nest as possible. Okay, so it's this meta agent which is instantiated this sub agent to do this task, which is then instantiated this other agent to do this sub task, and then you could see all of those three things. Those each layer has its own vid,
Yeah.
and but they're all connected back together back to the original longest use vid of the meta agent.
I
And
see
back and
where
from
you.
that even back to the vid of the principal that the meta agent derives its you know uh, authority from. What's the word I'm looking for? But anyway, you get it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, 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 yeah. So you could, I guess, in some logical way, thinking about those hierarchies, similar to, I don't know, what do we call it gosh, the management structure, like SMP, for example. If you remember those protocols, we have a dot, 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 many long dots eventually reach. The very last one is the one that's representing the session. Um, the other way to look at it would be
Yeah.
metadata. So you say we start with this VID, identify this running session. Okay. And then VID then has a lot of properties or metadata. And the metadata tell me which model is using, whether, when it started, timestamps, and blah, 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 a lot of things. So
Mhm.
that's the alternative way. You are capturing the same information.
And then you have the metadata hash into the vid itself. Okay, so you can actually verify that the what's being reported in the metadata is actually the origin of the ADA agent. ADA. I don't know where I came up with that. Anyway, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, yes. So the creation of the VID could be bounded to some of the inception event. That's precisely how we do it. So
Mhm.
that's assumed in a way. The VIDs in TSP are all created as what we calling it self-addressing or
Self-addressing.
self-certificating. That's what I meant is that the inception data is bounded with the key. And all the changes, like model changes, for example, could be represented as a rotation. So it's similar to a key rotation, which is all captured and can be verified. So that the provenance chain of the important pieces of the software here are actually also tied to the VID. So you couldn't,
Right.
yeah. So that all that is, it was not stated here, but it's implied.
So what are the options for dealing with this metadata? I mean, what's the best way to sort of attach the metadata so um, it can be assessed when you're deciding whether to engage with an agent?
So there are
Would
several type of like one type that we're talking about is that the information we want to capture at the inception, the creation of this agent
right,
is captured when we create the VID. So that's the
right,
two are bound, right?
right.
And
And then on
then
subsequent, yeah,
yeah, then there's some kind of let's say the model's precise, model so sequence number, for instance, can be captured every time we change. So that would be like a key rotation that's captured.
yeah,
There are other kind of more dynamic, I think we usually call credentials. So if somebody your operator or others can give you a credential as a like it's certified to be that's operated by this entity, etc. Right? So those credentials come on dynamically. They're also bound to the VID because you issue a credential bound for a particular VID, right? So when you show a credential, the credential can be proven that is issued to this particular VID.
Right.
So that those are more dynamic. They don't need to be go into the VID itself.
Right. Just as long as they're tightly bound.
Right. Presumably you can save that in a wallet, and then as the whatever context needs it, you will go to the wallet, search for it, and present it. So that will be the scheme.
So that's interesting. You're saying that these agents sort of at the end of a session or an instance when they go to sleep or whatever or pause,
Sure.
um, they can sort of self-issue credentials which capture details from that instance that can then be provided for the
It can be
next
self-issue, it can be
right.
other issue. A audit program can issue it, for example.
Well, it's not
Right.
a credential. It's a signed workflow. Here are the
Credentials,
actions I took,
Sorry, I
right?
yeah.
mean
It's not a
signed,
credential. It's
signed data.
self-signed. I mean, and who stores that information?
Okay, yeah. I think that we're using the word credential very loosely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, loosely speaking, somebody did something, and they claim it's the fact, and they sign it, and that's what I was referring to.
So that when you go back to that agent the second time, you have updated information on what's updated in terms of context, memories. Have you changed the
They
models
don't have to update anything at all. So
but
those things are the two events are not tied together. You go to
well,
sleep, you can simply be sleeping, that's doing nothing.
I can think the point is we want to understand the evolution of the agent because, like you said, you have this Genesis inception event where you don't have context, or you don't have memories, or maybe you have some, but after you go through some actions, you've accumulated things. And I'm just trying to figure out, is there a need or a way to say, oh, when I started yesterday, I had this information, and now I've done a lot of things, and now I've decided that I need to change models because the work is changing and I've got a lot more contacts, more memories, and so now I want to be able to at least let the next instance, whoever's using
Right.
that know.
So that's a great question. And I'm going to throw back to, our current scheme can definitely implement something like that. The question I'll throw back to, I think the more interesting question is what a user want to see. As long as a user want to see it, they think is valuable. So then yes, like what the user, like in your case, if we're just chatting with somebody,
Yeah,
we know if the memory is changing, right? Um,
yeah.
like,
Well, I
what
think
do you want
that's
to know about
yeah, but
that
also
change?
yeah, and at the same time, I think we can project what might be helpful to know. Say, by the way, I've updated
Yeah.
this, but yeah,
By the way, I
yeah,
remember this. That's not very interesting, right?
I understand that.
Like, what
Yeah,
is the interesting piece we want to capture?
yeah.
So I have Neil and then Steve.
Being an old database geek, this is exactly what databases rely upon absolutely and utterly is logging. Every single
Yeah, you're right.
transaction gets logged, and if the database goes down, they don't typically don't work from a backup of the database. They work up from a known good one and the logging
And
to
the log.
reproduce all the steps to get to
Right,
where they
right,
are.
right.
So this
So in
is
that case, Eric, like the logs you don't show to a consumer. The logs are only for like you can build some nice
Yeah,
features based on that,
yeah,
but
exactly.
we
Yeah,
don't show it to consumer. Yeah, Steve.
yeah, yeah.
Or maybe you do. I advocate for something I call a unified document workflow control. And I have it described in Appendix A of my taxonomy for agent systems, but it was pioneered by this little startup called Fractalic.ai, and it puts the log, the context, and the executable, the runtime itself, all in the same document. So you can then have a Merkle tree linking those documents together that can show execution state. You can rewind your execution state to any previous point. It essentially uses GitHub to bifurcate each time you send out a prompt or you get a response. It basically makes a new commit in GitHub, and then you
Yeah.
work on, and it's the future. To not do that
Mhm.
is just idiotic architecture. I think there's so much ahead of everybody else. And it's just the one guy. So I'll put it in the chat, fractalic.ai. Um, so that approach is so brilliant that
Yeah.
anything else from a security standpoint or any type of review standpoint, or once again being able to go back and rerun experiments or agent operations to do a probabilistic study of behavior that you need to look at, you rewind to a state and then run it forward 100 different times. It is fantastic.
Yeah. So here's
Fractalic.ai.
one vision, Eric, is that interaction dynamic are fully captured in
Mhm.
GitHub. It will be perfect for debugging because you know exactly where to look back to. And there
Yeah.
are variations of it that's maybe not so complete, but um, I want to say for the last minute that I think this picture by itself plus the composition of it allow us to do that. Whether that we capture fully or partially or something,
Yeah.
um, that we can debate, but this architecture allows that.
Okay. Yeah. Um, yeah, either by leveraging other agents or other services or other tools. Yeah, exactly. As long as
Right,
they're
right, and that's what are these the accountability basically, meaning that you would need to be able to go back in time, right? After the fact, you should be able to go back in time to discover whose fault it is. Something bad happened, who's responsible? What
it's
happened?
got to be somebody's fault.
Got to be somebody's. Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, But yeah, I've seen GitHub as a commonly proposed way of doing that. You're
Mhm.
capturing all the details, and then you are able to then back in time. You capture the timestamps and you can go back and do queries.
Yeah, once again, just to the what it does is it does a real-time interpretation of declarative language. So and then uh, so you can even change that. So once again, you can even do self-modifying workflows by having this document use a declarative permissions to allow, anyway, it's like I said, fractalic. Sorry,
Yeah.
rambling. It's the GitHub thing, but it's the best way of doing it.
The GitHub is the proposed data structure for capturing the information, and then you build a particular I don't know, query language or dynamic way of searching this data structure to discover, whose fault it is. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I like that very much. I often go back to something like that um, to see if if we could follow this architecture and implement that. So that would be definitely one of the way to doing this. And others may want to do it less completely. I don't know, it depends on the application, but um, at least we want to know that this is possible.
I'd just make a suggestion at the top of the hour here that taking this model and putting it in a cloud. So, I have a collection of agents that
Yeah,
has an orchestrator. I think that
yeah,
would be useful as taking this as the atomic piece and blowing that up and saying that the assumption is there's probably a single delegate that's the orchestrator of orchestrators. that all things might flow through as a central authority for the entire package, and it may be a highly personally controlled agent as opposed to service agents.
Yeah.
Now, one thing is when you're talking about personal agents, is that I actually conceive of it as two high-level agents. One is an internal agent, which I call the virtual assistant, and then the external agent I call the personally owned digital twin. And the reason is you want a firewall between those things because you don't want to have a database available to an externally facing agent that has like your credit card information or your sexy pictures or whatever else. So the virtual assistant when the external agent like says, "Hey, I found you a pair of sneakers," it could have been prompt injected, to pay $100,000 for sneakers, but then it has to go back to the virtual agent, which has its own redundant system, which says, "No, I don't think so. We're not paying $100,000 for those sneakers."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just read a Google some research paper doing exactly that. It's a pair. So I don't know the name they call it, but I would say it's a judge kind of a agent or a trusted, more trusted agent. And so
Yeah,
there would
right.
be
It's
two
it's
of
just
them.
redundancy, yeah, in any
Yeah, the
form.
two of them pair together, and for safety and all kind of like a critical moments, you rely on this agent, and the other agent does most of the other work. So a supervisor sitting on the side, and that's uh, a paradigm as well. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You have to the interior agent ultimately be the supervisor of the external agent,
Does it sit
Right.
on your left
and not
shoulder or
have
your
the
right
external
shoulder?
agent have too much data
So the
access.
supervisor, for example, will not use any information from the web, because the supervisor doesn't trust those information. It will only use your internal information to make a decision.
Hmm.
And that's the like one model. And this diagram can capture is you pair them together, and so it will be using this link. But the approval would go follow back and forth through that link. Um,
Hmm.
the supervisor can do policy controls. Okay,
Very good.
I hope this is useful.
Very useful.
Maybe we next starting from next week we finally can move forward. We will come revisit and come back and do refinement adjust, but we should be able to, I think, go move forward with the other sections of the spec, right?
Thank you. And where can I find the spec again? Because I've lost that link. Is it in?
Let me
I
see.
looked on the.
So I go trust over IP and then
Oh, right. All right.
EEA or something like that. Sorry, no, I
TS,
do TSP enabled here
uh,
comes. Yeah, this one. Let me put
all right, I
it
did.
on
Thank you.
the link as well. Yeah,
Also,
so
if
feel
people don't mind,
free.
I'm gonna drop my personal agent design docs into the channel as well. If
Please do, please
you're curious
do.
about it.
Yeah.
All right,
So
thank
I'll give you put that link there too. This diagram. I'm gonna add it into the document now, and then do some terminology, and then describe what we discussed today, essentially. Um, um, what the each box mean, and how would you use this to compose it if you need to. Maybe give some examples. Um, I think that's the next phase of the document.
Thank you.
After that, we could then start to have um, authorization schemes and accountability schemes.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Excellent.
Anyone
Thank
want
you.
to do a last comment? We are
Mhm.
quite a bit over time, but feel free.
Yep. No, thanks for letting me catch up because I've been I've missed the last couple.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
All right. Have a good rest of your week.
All
All right, bye,
right.
everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks, Steve.